You have probably experienced this more times than you can count without ever stopping to examine it closely. Moments like replying to a message almost instantly and only rereading what you wrote after it has already been sent, or agreeing to a request in a meeting and feeling a quiet resistance surface a few seconds later, or walking into a store with no specific intention and leaving with something in your hands while being unable to pinpoint the exact instant you chose it. And when these moments happen, they rarely feel strange, because the sensation of control feels intact, as if your mind weighed options quickly and moved forward with confidence. Yet if you pause and ask yourself a simple question, when exactly did I decide? The answer is often harder to locate than expected, because what feels like a conscious decision usually arrives as the final frame of a process that began much earlier, outside of awareness, long before the experience registered as a choice at all. And this is where the brain's real work begins, not with intention, but with filtering, as sensory systems constantly reduce the overwhelming volume of incoming information into something manageable, determining what deserves attention and what can fade into the background, while the thalamus silently directs this flow, amplifying some signals and dampening others so efficiently that by the time something reaches awareness, it already feels clear and structured. And this early filtering explains why familiar environments feel effortless, why you can navigate a routine morning without thinking about each step, and why certain cues immediately stand out while others are barely noticed. And as soon as this filtered information moves forward, it encounters memory, with the hippocampus providing context drawn from past experience, answering questions you never consciously ask, such as whether this situation resembles something you have handled before, whether it feels predictable or uncertain, or whether it fits into an existing pattern. And this is why a particular notification pulls your attention instantly while others dissolve unnoticed, or why one option in a lineup feels obviously right while another feels strangely invisible, even when they appear nearly identical. And at this stage, nothing feels like a decision yet. It simply feels like perception. But beneath that perception, the brain is already preparing behavior, as systems involved in learned patterns begin favoring responses that have worked efficiently in the past, not because they are objectively better, but because they require less energy to initiate, and this bias toward efficiency is subtle, presenting itself not as habit but as natural preference, which is why repeating familiar behaviors rarely feels automatic. It feels intentional, and as this bias builds, predictive processes come into play, with the cerebellum continuously anticipating what is likely to happen next, smoothing movements, timing, speech, and reducing friction before it ever reaches awareness, making actions feel fluid and reactions feel immediate. And this predictive smoothing creates a powerful illusion of mastery, because when nothing interrupts the flow, it feels as though you are actively in control. Even though the control is distributed across systems operating below conscious awareness, and by the time you become aware that you are about to act, whether that action is sending the message, making the purchase, or giving an answer out loud, motor preparation has already begun holding multiple possibilities ready, so behavior does not stall while you deliberate, because the brain is designed to preserve continuity rather than wait for reflection. And this is the moment many people assume consciousness takes over. But in reality, this is when the prefrontal cortex steps in, not as a decision, but as a storyteller, constructing a coherent explanation for actions already underway, weaving intention into behavior so that it feels authored and deliberate. And this explains why explanations come so easily after the fact, why you can justify a choice moments after making it, even if the justification did not drive the decision. And throughout this entire sequence, subtle monitoring continues, with the anterior cingulate cortex detecting small conflicts and adjusting effort when something feels slightly off, and the insula integrating internal bodily signals that show up as gut feelings, certainty, or hesitation, giving emotional weight to decisions without requiring conscious analysis. And when you finally slow down enough to reflect, the range of possibilities has already narrowed dramatically, leaving only a few options that feel reasonable, which makes the outcome appear obvious in hindsight. And this leads to an unsettling realization that the feeling of control does not necessarily guide decisions. It often follows them, arriving once uncertainty has already been resolved, mistaking completion for command. And this pattern does not occur occasionally. It repeats throughout the day in small, easily overlooked moments, shaping how long you linger on a piece of information, how quickly you trust a familiar response, and how effortlessly you move through routines, creating the persistent impression that you are steering every choice, even when the steering happened earlier, quietly and automatically, setting the stage for the deeper question that remains unresolved. Not just how decisions begin before awareness, but why they feel so personal once they surface. Once you start noticing that decisions often feel finished before they feel conscious, a deeper and more uncomfortable question begins to take shape. If so much of choosing happens beneath awareness, why do those choices feel so personal afterward? Why do they feel tied to identity, values, and intention rather than two silent processes running in the background? And the answer lies not in a single moment of decision, but in what happens immediately after, when the brain begins to make sense of what just occurred. Because as soon as an action is completed, the mind shifts from preparing behavior to explaining it. And this shift is subtle but powerful, as the prefrontal cortex begins to organize the outcome into a coherent narrative, linking the decision to reasons that feel stable and meaningful, so that saying yes to a request becomes evidence of being helpful. Choosing one option over another becomes proof of taste or preference, and reacting quickly in a conversation becomes part of how you see yourself as decisive or intuitive. And this narrative process feels natural because it unfolds automatically, not as a deliberate reconstruction, but as an immediate sense of understanding. And you might recognize this in moments when someone asks why you chose something and an answer appears instantly, even if you never consciously weighed alternatives, because the brain is remarkably good at generating explanations that feel internally consistent, drawing on memory, context, and self-image to produce a story that preserves continuity. And this is where identity begins to intertwine with behavior, as the hippocampus helps bind decisions to past experiences, reinforcing patterns that feel familiar and reliable, while networks involved in self-referential thinking integrate those experiences into a broader sense of who you are, making each choice feel like an expression of character rather than the result of momentary conditions. And this integration is reinforced every time a decision leads to a predictable outcome, because familiar results strengthen the same pathways that guided the behavior in the first place, creating a feedback loop where actions shape identity, and identity, in turn, shapes future actions without requiring conscious direction. And this is why certain patterns feel difficult to question, not because they are deeply analyzed, but because they have been repeated, explained, and woven into the narrative of the self over time. And in modern life, this process becomes even more pronounced, because environments are filled with repeated cues designed to feel familiar. From interfaces that reward predictable interaction to social situations governed by unspoken scripts. And each time you move smoothly through these contexts, the brain's efficiency systems are reinforced. Because what feels like deliberate conviction is often the accumulation of small, unexamined choices that were resolved before they reached awareness. And this does not mean those choices are meaningless or predetermined, but it does suggest that the experience of choosing is distributed across time, with preparation happening early, action unfolding smoothly, and understanding arriving last. And when you recognize this sequence, you may begin to notice subtle shifts in how decisions feel, how quickly certainty appears, and how easily explanations come to mind, especially in environments designed to encourage speed, familiarity, and repetition. And this recognition does not strip away control, but it reframes it, revealing that what you experience as control is less a moment of command and more a process of alignment, where perception, memory, prediction, bodily signals, and narrative all converge to produce behavior that feels coherent and intentional, even though no single moment fully contains the decision itself. And once this perspective settles in, it becomes clear that the same pattern extends beyond simple choices into attention, motivation, trust, and even the sense of continuity across time, shaping how the mind moves from one moment to the next while maintaining the impression of a steady self at the center. And this is where the story opens outward rather than closing. Because if decisions feel personal only after they have already begun, then many aspects of daily experience may be guided by similar hidden sequences, quietly influencing how you think, react, and identify with your actions in ways that are easy to overlook yet impossible to fully ignore once they become visible.